Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to Scouser Tommies. I'm Jim Boardman and I'm delighted to say that with me today is a new member of the Anfield Index team. If you like, he's writing for us on a regular basis. It's great to have him on board. He knows so much more about Liverpool than I do. It's Tony Evans. Tony, good to speak to you, good to hear from you and good to have you on the channel. How's things?
Oh, excellent. Well, apart from the football. Yes. But, it's great to be on board, so fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this just after one of the most embarrassing Liverpool games in ages. But the thing is, we don't need to tell you when that was because they just seem to be happening all through the season. It's difficult. It's difficult to watch Liverpool at the moment. And, maybe by the time you read this, it'll all be forgotten, but I doubt it. It's difficult to know where to start with them, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's happened is I don't think people give them enough credit for how well they've done. Is so many players in this team played way above their own level for so long. And normally, you'll get three who are playing really well and others will have dips, but they didn't. They all maintained a ridiculously high standard, which when you look at the actual ability, the levels of skill, you wouldn't say they should be anywhere near, especially not for a prolonged period. And then all of a sudden, they've all dropped off a cliff. They're all playing badly together. It's so yeah. I mean, then there's loads of issues there. We could waste a whole day or two talking about it. But the only thing is, the World Cup's around the corner. There'll be a break. They'll give them a chance to reset. And you know what? I never thought I'd be saying, "Oh, great, World Cup in the middle of the season." The Premier League stops. Delighted. I was like, this is just crap. I don't want it. Now I'm like, bring it on. Qatar rules sports washing. We love it all.
Yeah, I mean, it's just good to it'd be good for a few days where you can walk into a paper shop without having to walk straight out again. Because I haven't bought a paper for ages because of how bad. I've kept saying to myself, I'm going to go out on a Sunday and buy a paper, and then every Sunday I'm like, no, we'll leave that this week. So hopefully that changes. But what won't change and doesn't seem to change is that, and you think, I mean, this is a more general topic now, but it's happening in every game, and I can guarantee that if you're listening to this, to the day we record it or months ahead, I get the feeling the same thing will have just happened at our last game. And this is all the anti-Hillsborough chanting that seems to be the fad at the moment, the in vogue thing to do. It happens when we go away and it happens at home. And you'd think by now people would understand, because to me, I think I spent a long time, say maybe 10 years ago, I spent a lot of time explaining to people what the boycott of the Sun was actually about and explaining what had really happened. And time again, people would go, my God, I didn't realise that was what happened. I didn't realise that was the truth. I'd only ever heard this other version. But now, personally, I don't think anyone's got an excuse not to understand what's gone on. So, I mean, you'll know yourself the same. Why does it seem like we're hearing more and more of these chants?
Well, it's worse than ever, and I can't believe it's getting so bad. I think it's a young generation who 10 years ago, when the Hillsborough Independent panel come along, and we were explaining it to a lot of people, and many of those who were alive in 1989 and were of a reasonable age realised with shock and horror that they've been lied to on such a level, not only by the Sun, but by the authorities. And so there was a couple of years between the Hillsborough Independent panel and the inquest where all of a sudden everything seemed to be going in our direction, and then it's gone completely the opposite way. And I think it's also a wider thing. I haven't listened to it today, but there was a thing on BBC Radio 4 about people who have been trolling the victims of the Manchester Arena bombings. And you think to yourself, oh my God, that's unbelievable. And one of the points that I keep making over Hillsborough and why it's so important and why we care and why we carry on is it's not for us. It's not for us. It's gone for us. Nothing will ever make it better. Nothing will ever bring back the dead. Nothing will ever bring back the pain. Nothing will ever take away the nightmares. But what really sickens me is that at least 2 victims of the Manchester Arena bombing died for the same systemic reasons that the authorities failed them as people died at Hillsborough. And we should have learned from Hillsborough. We should have learned people shouldn't be doing that. But then when you see that those victims are getting trolled as well, your mind explodes. And that makes me think of things like Sandy Hook. And, we've seen really high-profile stuff. And when you add into that toxic, and it's generally as a result of online stuff. When you throw in the toxic elements of football, it makes it worse. I mean, you see this Leeds dickhead at the weekend getting off at the station with the Sun, and he's Irish as well. Yeah. I mean, for God's sake, how many, sort of a Leeds fan who's Irish, and presumably by the look of him, he isn't exactly from the upper classes, let's say. And, and he's waving the Sun, and you think, what's going on in people's minds? I don't know what to do about it, except I think the football authorities need to, and the police need to crack down. They can see where people are sitting, you can see who's singing, you can trace people with tickets. And I think a couple of high-profile basically as a singling out would do an awful lot to help it. I mean, Charlotte Hennessy is brilliant, sort of in chasing down trolls on Twitter, and calling the police, and Louise too. They're a fantastic pair. But if someone's got to hold these people who are obscene, it's. The funny thing is, you can imagine there'd be the same sort of people who'd be aghast at what's gone on over Sandy Hook, and yet they're doing the same thing to the families and the survivors of the most visible tragedy in British history.
Yeah, it feels to me as well. A lot of it is I don't know what they can't be very nice people. That's one of the things I'll say. I get that sometimes when you're in a group, and maybe you've had a couple of drinks, maybe you find yourself doing something you wouldn't normally do, but not to that extent, and not to sort of feel bad afterwards. I find it frustrating that when we call other clubs out, that they don't just at least go on social media and say, listen, dickheads, don't do that. It's not nice. Stop doing it. When it happened in the Charity Shield, Community Shield final, whatever you want to call it these days, City fans had been coming out with the usual stuff. That City supposedly put a statement out during the game that got read out on TV. None of the people at the game were watching TV. They were at the game. Now, if they'd have all sort of looked on the Twitter on the way home, the Facebook, whatever, and seen the club putting out a very clear message all across their website, this will not do, this is not good enough, please stop doing this. To me, that would have started a little bit of education, because I think sometimes you can... There's some people who aren't going to change. That's just the way they are. But there's for everyone like that, there's maybe 9 or 10 looking on who would learn something. And I've seen you have so many Twitter arguments with people, and I often think the person that your argument's with is probably not going to change their mind. But there's countless other people looking on who are going to start having a bit of food for thought at least. And education is so important. And again, the FA, the Premier League and the clubs should just be doing it. I'd be ashamed if Liverpool fans were doing that to someone, and I'd want my club to act. I don't understand why other clubs aren't acting.
Manchester City's behaviour was absolutely obscene. I can't believe it. And, part of me understands why 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, people, I was a dickhead once as well.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I was a dickhead once as well. And, and I said and did things which I look back on, and I'm like, oh, why did I do that? Did I have no humanity? Young people often have no sense of their own mortality or anyone else's, things you think are funny when you're young. So I can kind of get that, and I can almost forgive that. What I can't give is fully grown adults with children, with families who are doing this. And what I can't forgive is football clubs, organisations who find themselves so blinded by a rivalry which they're winning, by the way, in no uncertain terms, that they can't find their own basic humanity. And that was, for City to do that, I was like, oh. And I don't blame obviously all City fans. You got to divorce the club from the fans, because I know loads who have tried to help over Hillsborough and who have been really, who do care. But it's what City did. They were feeding the weaponisation of things like Hillsborough and Heysel from their fan base, and they kind of, by the back door, it felt like they were endorsing it. Now they'll go, oh no, of course we weren't, and they'll be horrified to hear someone say something like that about them. Well, you know what? If you're not against the problem, you're part of the problem, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think another thing about the football authorities not stepping in on it, I actually think there's an element, and whether this theory is true or not, I don't know. There's an element who are kind of thinking, well, I can't be racist, I can't be sexist, I can't be homophobic, I can't chant any of those things because they're actually illegal, and if I'm caught, I could be in some serious trouble. Whether you're caught's another matter, but, there's that sort of serious deterrent. But Hillsborough feels like it's an easy target for them because it's probably not illegal as such, other than, it's harassment, I suppose, isn't it? There's probably legal ways you can do people for it, but it's not as cut and dried. It's certainly not something in the FA's rules on what you are and aren't allowed to do. If a footballer had a go at a Liverpool player and used a Hillsborough slur, they wouldn't really get into as much trouble as they would if it was sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever. But I do think that's what some of it is. It's another way of them just being cruel, because they enjoy being cruel, and they think that banter, for want of a better word, can go that far. So this is their way of doing it. I might be wrong, but to me that's part of it as well.
Yeah, Jim, one of the turning points for me in not only sort of in terms of football, but bigger than that, was the 1985 semi-final at Goodison. And the ticket I had, me and my brother, were two seats, was one seat. We were 2 and 3 away from the director's box in the main stand.
Yeah.
And Bobby Charlton was in the director's box, and I looked across, and there was a Munich song going up, and I thought, it was his mates. He was there, and before that, I'd been a plank with the rest of them, but I looked at them and I thought, nah, that's not good. That's not good.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. And I thought to myself, and there is, it might seem to a lot of these people who was singing this stuff and doing this stuff, it kind of, it's. I used to actually go to Old Trafford and see fellas who were my age, when the Munich songs went up, going mad and throwing themselves at the barriers trying to get it, it's us, like. Yeah. And I think, well, it's like, what can it matter to him, one of them? And, he wasn't even born, likely, when it happens. And then you only come to realise later that, he would have, he would have known people who were overwhelmed by the tragedy. And while not many people were that directly involved, because it was a small number, there's a wider sense of grief, and we understand that within the city. And yet it becomes part of your culture. It becomes part of what is important here, and that's why people get upset about it. But it's kind of, again, to a certain extent, a lot of the survivors, and especially those who are in the pens, they're in the position of Bobby Charlton was in back in 1985. They were there. They had near-death experiences. Their mates died. Some of us saw more dead bodies than, I don't know, than the majority of people who've served in the armed forces. Yeah. It's one of those things that, which, you sing it in a trite way. And I don't think most people actually stop to consider the impact it has.
No. And I think this is it. I always say that, I was lucky I wasn't there that day. This was one of those semis where, for my chances of getting a ticket were out the window. I think you needed vouchers in those days to get a ticket, and I didn't have the right voucher. And I can't remember the issue. I don't think we could get time off work to go and queue and all the rest of it. So in the end, never got a ticket. And in fact, I think in the end, I was watching it with a Blue in a pub that day, because it wasn't meant to be on TV, of course, because they never did show live footy in those days for the semis. But it ended up being live because of what went on. And I can just remember the horror. But I've always looked back and remembered the lad from work who did go, and how on the Monday in work, everyone assumed that it might have been me, and the look on people's faces when they realised it wasn't me. But then thinking, my God, what are the look on their faces who realised who it was? It was the other young Liverpool lad of that age who did a similar job, you know, a couple of offices away from me. And that's just one little tiny story, isn't it? The people who went through it, the people who lost their loved ones, the stories, and you've only got to read one story to me and you feel something. And maybe that's a way that clubs like City can kind of get the message across. Maybe they should start sticking some of these stories onto their website, because there's plenty of survivors who can't talk about what happened, still struggle to talk about what happened, as you know full well. And I know you know people who's absolutely been destroyed by it. And there's people who aren't with us anymore because of what it did to them. But maybe just having a listen to some of those stories might get through to them. But it feels like it's a big ask for us to actually have to keep pushing it like this. Why do we have to? But I suppose we're never going to stop. That's something we feel like we've all done. And when I'm at the ground and I'm hearing those chants, I'm not bothered about me. I'm bothered about survivors who I know are amongst us. You know, maybe haven't even told anyone they're a survivor, don't talk about it. Maybe the ones who do, the people who are having nightmares, and the family members who are there who lost loved ones. You know, the kids who never got to see the dad because they were tiny when the dad died. All of this, it's like Charlotte's one that you mentioned. There's just too many of these stories, so we've got to defend them, and I'm sure we will. But then the other thing that's creeping in, and to me, it's on a different level. But it's still bad. Is all the sign-on stuff. So every game for years you get the sign-on, and Jay, who does Scouser Tommies with us, he calls it lower club bingo chanting, because it feels like lower league clubs come along, and but now Premier Leagues as well, and they have this little rota of songs they're going to sing, and there's always a sign-on type song in there. But we played Forest and they were doing it, and obviously we've got Forest memories from the 80s, but Nottingham was I think the 8th poorest city in the country, according to something I read recently. I'm sure Leeds, there was a few of them that were trying it, similar situation. You can go through all the clubs, and there's poverty everywhere. And even Manchester, I've exchanged quite a few tweets and tried to help out with one of the Manchester food banks, and that's joined forces with Liverpool food banks. I mean, there's people in this country who having to go to food banks. Even saying that, we've kind of become almost numbed to what that means, that there's people in this country who haven't got enough money to eat and having to go and basically get some charity to eat, and charity that it's not off the government, it's off other people who are being kind enough to help them in 2022. I find that astounding. Yet there's people in football grounds who've got the privilege of paying 60 quid or whatever, plus their ale money, plus the transport, to sit there and sing Sign On and basically just mock poor people. To me, the Scouse Not English, if anything, is aimed at that kind of attitude, not everyone in England. Because as you know and I know, there's loads of great people in England. It doesn't matter, but there's just all these idiots who find this a bit of fun.
Well, it's ironic that food banks, are so prevalent now, and that the fan supporting food bank thing started in Liverpool because the essence of what we call Scouts is rooted in essentially food banks.
Yeah,
it was Scouts was used as an insult to those who used free soup kitchens, who bought the cheapest food they could get from sort of mobile, like soup trolleys, yeah. And one of them, and generally they were the Irish immigrants, and they sort of mostly germinated around Scotland Road. And the thing is, Scouse is a fairly recent thing. 1947 was the first time it was used in the Oxford English Dictionary, right. And it began to coalesce as an identity about 100 years ago, funnily enough. And where it was up until then, the people on the Docklands of Liverpool, where the immigrant communities come in after the famine. Again, we go back to hunger. who come in after the famine, they would have identified as Irish. Round ours had an Irish nationalist MP until 1929.
Yeah.
So it's long after the sort of Irish independence and the Free State was up and running. So that's how it come. And what it was a term used by the English to insult the immigrants. So the Scouse Not English thing is I maintain you cannot be Scouse in English. They're mutually exclusive because it was an insult. And, it's so it comes from that. And here we are again with the English celebrating hunger and mocking hunger, and Scousers trying to fight it. And and of course we know that there are plenty of English people across the country. As you say, the Manchester and Liverpool food banks joined together, did fantastic work in the pandemic and the lockdowns, especially when all those poor students in Manchester were basically locked in like a concentration camp and couldn't get out and get any food. And the Liverpool and Manchester food banks, Man City food banks, went up with loads of pizzas. So we do use the sweeping thing, the English, but it's not quite like that. But the Scouse identity is, it's founded in being an outsider, being an immigrant, being the object of ridicule, and it's never changed. And you know what? You're saying about these places, Nottingham, you're saying about like Manchester and all that. Well, I remember back in the 80s and in the days when it was difficult for a Scouser to spend a £20 note in London. The suspicion was unbelievable. It was like they didn't want our money. They didn't want us in their pubs. One of them. It was far worse than it is now in that way. But at that time, Liverpool has a reputation for being a really violent city. I remember the Daily Mirror, sort of did a piece where they quoted someone saying, "You should put a wall around Liverpool, like the Berlin Wall, and keep them in." It's one of them, and it was a symbol of everything that's wrong with urban life, And I used to read all this and see all this, and then you go to other places. I mean, we got off the train one night in Wigan. Thought, we'll have a drink on the way back from, I forget where we're coming back from, sort of. But we went for a bevy in Wigan. And it was carnage. People were murdering each other in the streets. The same in Leicester. Blackburn. And you go out in Liverpool and you barely see a fight. Yeah. And yet we had this dangerous reputation. And it's all rooted in anti-Irishness. You can go back. All the tropes are always said, drunken, sentimental, emotional, things they said about the Irish, and you can go back, trace it through the papers and follow it. But I couldn't believe, Nottingham was like the Wild West. Yeah. They were killing each other, and we were like, we'd be in the Yankee and the Wine Lodge, and you'd only see, you probably, if during the peak 80s, going out, and bear in mind, I was deeply embedded in what you call scally culture, and you'd probably only see 3 or 4 fights a year, if that. Yeah. And yet Liverpool always had this reputation for being worse. And you look now, it's like, sort of at the figures for burglary, you look at the figures for gun crime and all that. But it's always Liverpool. It's always Liverpool. And, and yes, we have had some high profile. You cannot deny, the Bulger thing, was massive and still is in people's psyche. You've got, obviously the poor little girl in Dovecot the other week, and and then Rhys Jones. You've got things like that, but there is a sense all the way through that, like sort of Liverpool's history, certainly post-famine, that violence in Liverpool was always amplified more by the press in this country. Well, for example, everyone knows Peaky Blinders now, but like it's they wear what they really wear was a street gang in Birmingham, and Manchester had the Scufflers, but guess what? Who were the most famous ones? And the High Rip in Liverpool, they got most of the publicity, and of course, when they come to name, they didn't call him Jack the Scuffler, they didn't call him Jack the Blinder. He was Jack the Ripper because Liverpool always had its problems amplified by the rest of the country because it was seen as a rogue city, a city of outsiders, a city that voted for Irish MPs, a city that had sectarian problems, sectarian riots. And so Liverpool was always outside the mainstream in this country, and it still hasn't gone away. And the deep hatred of Scousers has long roots that go back. Well, we're heading for like 2 centuries now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a city. I mean, we see similarities with other cities. I mean, Glasgow's a place, and you think, yeah, there's things in common. Newcastle is a place, there's things in common. And I mean, maybe one thing in common with Newcastle is, in my view, whenever I go to Newcastle, I find really friendly people who can't do enough for you to help you. They go out of the way to make sure you're okay and stuff like that, which, it's kind of how Liverpool is. I mean, Liverpool's such a relaxed place. Don't get me wrong, though. You're right. There will be people a bit tanked up. There'll always be trouble. You'll get that in any town centre, any city centre, on a night when everyone's had a few. That's what happens. But the thing about those incidents you mentioned, though, there's those horrific moments like the Bulgers and all the other similar things that happen. I always feel like, I mean, with the sad story of the little girl in Dovecot recently, I just thought, you know what, they'll find who did that, because although there's a kind of anti-grass culture, if you like, in Liverpool, there's no way you're going to get away with that, because Liverpool will make sure you get dealt with for that. And in some ways, maybe they're better off being caught by the police than being caught by the people, if that makes sense. Because as a community, there's limits you go over, and I think it becomes self-policing, doesn't it? In Liverpool, there's a lot of sort of self-policing, and it is like a village. I mean, it's surprising. Like, people say that, but it's surprising how you hear about things of people who you think aren't connected, and all of a sudden, people know stuff that's gone on. It's bizarre.
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, you really... You look at that and you think to yourself, this is beyond the pale. People can't get away with it, and you would hope. And from I've heard, everyone has been putting forth names, and and in a city where where speaking to the police on any level is considered almost a crime in itself. I think people do understand where the limits of casual and inoffensive criminality, if I can put it like that way, and where people need to, really need to stand up for the society, really. And that's the thing. One of the things that happens in the aftermath of Thatcherism, we come into this, there is no society world, where you only had responsibility to yourself and those closest to you. You didn't have any responsibility to anyone else. And while that's hurt Liverpool as well as everywhere else, there is still a great sense of having responsibility to people around you, and which, to be fair, you do get in a lot of working class communities, and it's encouraged in working class communities. But it does seem that's fraying everywhere, and it's held together longer in Liverpool. That's just my view as someone who's now lived in London for a long time, and so you get to see both sides of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. And I'm sure that, there's communities within London as well, of course, that are close-knit and people look after each other and everything. It's everywhere. And maybe the thing that's in common with that is when people are looking after others other than themselves, other than their own families, is maybe that these people are at the poor end of the scale in terms of what kind of money they've got coming in, because Liverpool's never been they say it's never been an affluent city. Of course it has, because that's why we've got all that great architecture. It's one of the probably richest cities in the world, but not the people in it weren't necessarily the richest, because they were just looked down upon, weren't they? And as you say, the anti-Irish sentiment, I found it mad growing up that I didn't get taught officially anything about what was going on in Ireland. You didn't get to hear anything officially about what was happening in Ireland and why there was a dispute, because, you know, the government didn't want kids to know, did they? So there was no sort of curriculum lesson on what was going on in Ireland and the troubles in Ireland. You only ever found out because people who wanted you to know the truth told you. And I doubt that's changed now. I doubt kids today are being told a sort of even an impartial attempt at what happened in Ireland, because this government and this country doesn't like to sort of own up to what it's done in the past, because in my view, it wants to do it again. And that's why I think it's so important that places like Liverpool sort of keep shining a light on all of this stuff, because it's been Liverpool over and over again. But just as with Hillsborough, it could have been your club. Poverty and issues like Liverpool has faced, it could be your city, it could be your people in the future. You know, sitting around and letting them get away with it is exactly how they get away with it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you know, essentially, when you're saying the sums right, your murderers, what you're doing, you're endorsing national newspapers lying to you. You're endorsing police getting off the hook for, despite, you know, murderous mistakes. Frankly, you know, you're endorsing the police running a full cover up to protect their own reputations. And you know what? If you think that that's right, well, frankly, you're fucking mad.
Yeah, and it's going to be you next, and that's the thing what people don't realise. I mean, there was a thing, I think it was a reporter in the Times of all places, and he actually did a piece about benefits saying, look, don't ever think that you're never going to ever be on benefits, because you really don't know. And in his case, it was, he had a disabled son, if I'm not mistaken, and he needed benefits because the cost of looking after his son was phenomenal, because of the extra stuff they needed, you know, in terms of people and equipment and getting him to a right school that could help him and make him move forward. There's no one that I know of that would begrudge, you know, I'm sure not a poor reporter, if you like, from the Times. I'm sure, you know, they're not, you know, they're not short of cash, they're quite well to do, but there's a limit to what they can do, and they wanted the best for their son, and the country's helped them. And, you know, at the same time, he's talking about how he felt like there was a real stigma to it. And I, personally, I'm sure there are some, but personally, I don't know anyone who's claiming benefits and wants to. I think most people would rather be well enough to work and rather be able to go and do a job, go and do an honest day's work and earn the money for it, because no one really wants to sit around and doing nothing, do they? They want to, let's face it, benefits don't exactly make you rich, and they would just rather have some money and be able to spend it comfortably without worrying that they're going to be told they're not allowed it.
Yeah, well, I'll be absolutely honest, Jim. Like, I'd rather sit around doing nothing.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to, but here's the thing: the other half of the equation is if you are sitting around doing nothing, then you've got nothing. You can't go out. You can't go to the match. You can't do all the things you want to do. Yeah. The basic, you fancy a curry. Well, you're not going to be able to afford a curry. So things that a lot of people take for granted, you can't do, and nobody wants that. I'm telling you, it's like everyone's full of this. Oh yeah, look at them. They've got everything. They've got widescreen TVs and they've got iPhones, and I'm like, that's actually not the problem. They don't cost that much in the great scheme of things, and you can actually get them on tick. You know, it's like there are ways of doing it. You know, you take out a phone contract and you can get the latest iPhone. You know, and you're not paying that much a month. But what is the killer is the lack of the lack of possibilities, the lack of the lack of expectation, and the feeling that you're going to be stuck in this situation all your life. Yeah. There's nothing worse than that, and we need to offer people opportunity. We need to, you will sit there doing nothing if you believe you can't do anything, and if it's every place you turn to, you get knocked back. You learn the lesson quickly. I in the early 80s when I come out of school in the late 70s and in the early 80s, there were very few jobs in Liverpool. You either left or, if you could get the money to leave and you could and you had the energy to do it, or I knew some kids who went to school with me who went years and years without working, and you know what? It's like they were demonized as lazy, but they tried and they tried. They'd spend 2 years going after hundreds of jobs, and in the end, after 2 years, they're like, "I'm not going to get any.
No.
Why try? And then you've got that lost generation, and it's happening again, and it's just sickening. One thing I will say though, as having worked for the Times, you'd be surprised how little they pay.
yeah, I can imagine, because we know where all the money goes to, don't we? And it's not the people down below the top tier, shall we say? But and of course, journalism, is another thing that's dying out. Maybe we should get onto that sometime, because I was reading a piece. There's actually a new Liverpool outlet that's independent called the Liverpool Post. And I got an email off them the other day, one of their weekly emails, and they were just talking about, bizarrely, that Google gave a grant to the Echo, which is obviously owned by Reach PLC, and a FTSE 100 company, and they got a grant from Google to take on the Post, which is a little sort of almost, I wouldn't say voluntary. They managed to bring enough money in to keep themselves ticking over and to pay themselves a little bit of money, I'm sure. But there's about 3 of them running everything for this new outlet that's independent. And what they talk about is, there's the person who sent the email said he'd worked as an intern at one of the other regional papers, probably the ones in the likes of St Helens and Wigan and so on, I would imagine. And the editor there telling them that there used to be 20, 30 staff doing things, and they'd had plenty of time to look into issues, get to the bottom of stories and get them out there, get the truth out to people. And then now they'd be down to 3 people who had to just spend the day pushing social media things and, trying to clickbait things and all the rest of it. There's just no real journalism. And this independent outlet's trying to do that, because another thing that we're going to have to be careful about is that what's helped the Hillsborough campaign get to so much prominence is that lots of people have put countless hours into it, not just hours they've been paid for as well. You'll know yourself, there's loads of people who've written about it, investigated it, pushed it, and they've put, so much into it because they wanted to get to the truth. But the way journalism is now, I get the feeling that we're going away from that to the point where, I'm sick of seeing stories come up on certain websites that's basically telling us how someone got an answer wrong on the chase that afternoon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see things that make you groan, and to be fair, the Daily Mail put a lot of money into journalism. They do more than most, whether you like them or not. They do invest in journalism. But I saw today there was a thing on the Daily Mail website where they had one of the probably a young kid harvesting Twitter for views on the problems in Dover and all that sort of stuff, and she quoted Sir Michael Tate, a former Tory MP, which, I mean, frankly, Sir Michael Tate on the Twitter thing, it's like it's a parody. It's obvious it's a parody, and yes, sometimes you're so blinded by your Tory hatred. I am that I don't recognise parodies immediately because they're so close to the truth. But Sir Michael Tate, I mean, come on, it's And of course, it was in the piece. Everyone had great fun with it and laughed at it. Then the Mail reposted the stuff and took it out. And there's probably someone's lost their job there and having a setback in the journalistic career for what it's worth. But this is not the way they should be doing it. Journalism is it should be about trying to tell the truth. Without being too pompous, holding power to account or doing your best you can to do it. And all right, sometimes it's fairly trivial, when you're working in football journalism. But you know what? The one thing I always tried to do was hold, in particular, Liverpool to account and football clubs to account.
Yeah.
It was important to me because they can't just ride roughshod. And as a result, some of us ended up on a blacklist. Some of us were compared to the Khmer Rouge.
Yes,
I mean, it's. I think you might have been in a similar situation.
Yes.
But at least we tried. We're trying, and journalism isn't about sitting on a computer rewriting other people's copy, harvesting Twitter, looking on Facebook. It's not about that. It's about making contacts and trying to get stories, and stories that are worthwhile. I never cared about transfer stories. I don't give a flying, whatever about them, because that's what the club do, and it's up to them. And if you're here, there's transfer story, big deal. What I did care about is where the money went on transfers.
Yes.
And that was divvied up. Who it went to, that mattered to me because this was the money that comes through us paying through the gate. It comes through our Sky and BT subscriptions. It's what we pay for ultimately, and you should be accountable for it. And agents and intermediaries raking money in that offended me. So in those terms, they're the things that even in football you try to hold people to account, and where you think people are wrong, then shine a light on it, illuminate it. And we had lots of that with Liverpool in the first 5 years of Fenway, particularly, and in the previous 5 years with Hicks and Gillette. And as you know, we fought those battles, and we tried to be as honest and make the club as transparent as possible. And people don't like it because you know what they want, and that's the worst thing. They don't want to be told the truth. What they want to do is have the rosy view of their club and how great it is. And then of course you lose a few games and they all turn, and there's lynch mobs come over club. The same people who don't want to know about the seamy sides of the club. So I kind of, party of despair about it all. But in the end, you've got to look at what's important. And coming back around full circle, what's important is what Hillsborough. It's not just important for us. And I think I said in my column on Friday, you know what? It's not about the battle for justice anymore. It's about the battle to stop people amplifying injustice. We're never going to get justice. We've moved on to a different thing. And what it is now is to make sure that people know the real truth, and people know that they can't. You know what? They sing to us always, the victims. Well, you know what? We were the fucking victims. We remain the fucking victims. We're victims of an outrage, of an injustice. And you know what? They shouldn't think it's funny. And we're not self-pitying about it because we fought every step of the way, and we will continue. I will die fighting this, right? So, but we are victims. That's the bitter truth. And I'll tell you what, if they had any decency, they'd get behind us.
They would, and that is one of the frustrations. This city, there's so much of what you just said there. We could do podcasts on every sentence almost of what you've just said. I mean, certainly the Khmer Rouge stuff we should go back to. That was funny, and the thing that struck me most about that period of time was when I say Liverpool's a village, so was the sort of Liverpool fan base, or at least the lot of us then, that we're all comparing notes with each other and realising that the story that he told you and he told me and he told him and he told the other person, actually there were great big holes in all of this, because the mistake they always made when they weren't being honest with us was they'd get the big parts of the story sort of spot on, they'd get the story straight, but it's all the little bits of filler in between that trip them up, and straight away you know that something's amiss. And they took on the wrong club, didn't they? And just like people take on the wrong city. And the truth is that I would say most of the people who are sort of writing passionately about Liverpool, whether it's the city or the club, want the best for the city or the club. I mean, when I was writing for the Mirror, I wouldn't sort of be told what I was going to write. I wrote what I thought was best for the club. And some people said, what are you writing for them for? They're anti-Liverpool, which, let's face it, every paper's anti every club, aren't they, depending on who you support. But, better to have someone inside trying to get that message out than to be outside of it, not able to get your message out. And that's what I think has been key to so many of our battles, that we've tried to be honest, we've tried to be straight, we've tried to do it for the right reasons. And as a result, I think there's a hell of a lot of integrity among people who do write about Liverpool.
Yeah. And you know what? The thing is, I've been accused of hating every club. And and to be honest, when you're in football journalism after a while, you kind of, it takes the edge off your fanaticism. And you want to see good people successful. So you want nice people to win, and you want bad people to do badly. So, it's so that is into it. But the one thing I will, because I grew up with perhaps an idealized view of Liverpool, I'll hold Liverpool to account probably more than any other club. And in fact, definitely more. I'm not saying probably. I will. And I am outraged more when Liverpool don't live up to my expectations than I am when anyone else does. So in that sense, I do hate the club. But I mean, to be honest, they haven't done that badly in the last couple of years, apart from the behaviour during lockdown with the furlough scheme, which was just unconscionable. But for the most part, and people get upset about Fenway. For the most part, Fenway have listened, and they don't listen first time round.
No,
where like you say to them, don't do that. That's a mistake, and they go and do it,
yeah.
and then everyone goes, that's a fucking mistake, and then they do a U-turn. But they do listen. Other clubs don't, So, but it's so I'm heading towards the FSG out territory, and we don't really want to go there today.
No,
but it's insane. It's insane. You know what? All clubs get transfers wrong. All clubs don't spend when they might have spent, and you look back and you say, woulda, shoulda, coulda. But like Fenway aren't the worst owners, and sometimes the criticism of them is used to deflect from what's going on actually in Liverpool and the problems that within the club are being caused in Liverpool, not Boston. But again, that's for another subject, another day.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? There's this simplistic thing as well with fans that, and actually with some clubs that when things aren't going well, there must be one thing that's wrong. And when we find that one thing, we can just change that one thing and everything will be fine. So that's why so many clubs fire managers and then find themselves in an even worse situation 6 months later. And then again and again and again. And because, well, maybe they know what the real problem is and it's the people who've got the power to do the firing of the managers that are wrong. But, we, as a club, I think we're not like that. We've always been patient with managers, maybe not as patient with Kenny second time round as we could have been. But again, we're going down that FSG path. But I think one thing FSG and Klopp have got in common is that they do things, some work, some don't. But when they don't, they try to fix it. They try to learn from it. And there's a lot of clubs not really doing that. So, I'm still quite pleased with what we've ended up with in this modern day of football, because we could have ended up with a lot worse as owners. We could have been in a much worse mess. And thinking back to when we were all over the TV talking about Liverpool going into receivership and administration, I mean, those days seem such a long time ago now, but I'm sure there's going to be another club in that situation soon. The European Super League, for example, that was rightly derided for the way it was done, but what then happened was the Premier League basically just glossed over it and didn't sort of address some of the reasons that people thought there might be need for a change. And it's so, it's not just Liverpool that's wrong, getting things wrong. To me, the Premier League's getting things wrong because it is still all about greediness, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And the European Super League's coming. It's Manchester City will see to that. The great perception in the boardrooms, not just in the Premier League but across Europe, is that the only way to deal with City, the growing threat in Newcastle and obviously PSG, is to have some sort of league where there's strict spending caps in there, and they don't believe UEFA can do it. The only way they can do it is by setting up the Super League, and probably the only way they can sell it to these state-owned entities is by having a closed, sort of a closed league with no promotion and relegation. I mean, this is all rumbling on, and all rumble on. We'll probably be talking about this at length in the next couple of years, but it's going to happen. And when the Premier League clubs throughout Project Big Picture, which Liverpool obviously and United and the Football League sort of joined up to suggest a plan for the future, it was inevitable that we'd be on the Super League path. I don't want to see a Super League path. I just, it frightens me to think how the game will go. And I kind of don't want to play Barcelona, twice a year.
No.
I mean, so once in a blue moon's fine. That's great. Big night. Oh yeah, Barcelona coming to town. Real Madrid's coming to town. Don't want to play. We play clubs too often anyway in the Champions League now, the group stage.
Yeah.
But I don't want that. I'd rather play Everton. I'd rather play clubs like that on an annual basis and the traditional rivalries. But and that's the thing. The people like Everton don't realise that they're the ones who are going to be left outside the top table. They're not going to get in. And yet, it's they all love the city mates, don't they?
Well, yeah, that's the weird thing. I mean, I always felt like there was a bit of that. It was like, I don't know, we sort of, and this is why it's so distressing seeing what City have done. We used to kind of get on okay with City. And I can remember admiring their fans that stayed with them when they went down 2 divisions. You know, they always had massive attendances for away games and stuff. They had this real backing. And then I also remember being at Anfield when they were protesting against Thaksin Shinawatra. You know, they wanted him out of the club, you know, and sympathising with them at the time. But I wonder how many of those fans still go to the game now. And I don't know how many of them are the ones that are singing the Hillsborough chants and all the rest of it, but it feels like, you know, it feels like a different club now. And there's times when I find myself sympathising more with Man United fans than Man City fans, and I never thought I'd ever hear myself say that.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly fan bases, and this is not just a knock at City, because we saw it at Chelsea as well, and we'll probably see it at Newcastle, how quickly they turn and become something that are very different to what they'll traditionally be, how quickly they become entitled. And that's a disappointing thing. And, you know, and the thing about City is like, we always had a superficially good relationship with them. But you know what? You go up there to Main Road and you soon learn that you're getting that Mancunian reception.
Yes.
You know, you might both dislike Manchester United to a great degree, but you get the full man greetings when you went to Main Road, and we should never forget that. The inbuilt rivalry between the cities meant it was always going to happen. But no, it is disappointing, you know, because like you, I always thought they were very, very funny in that dry, Mancunian way. So it's it is absolutely disappointing the way things have gone. And you know what, I wouldn't mind if they just said, you know what, this is City. They were my club before. You know, Abu Dhabi bought us. You know, I couldn't do nothing to stop that. I don't agree with the regime over there, but I'm going to enjoy supporting the City as much as I can. I could live with that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, but no, it's a slavish defence.
That's the thing.
Everything they do.
Yeah, that's the bit I don't understand. I was talking about this. I've talked about it a few times. That if it had been us that had been bought out by, you know, the same people that buying out City and Newcastle and PSG, that I feel there had been a lot of resistance amongst us for it to happen in the first place, but inevitably it would have happened. And then I think at that point we'd have been accepting to a certain extent alongside constantly campaigning to try and make them change. And whether we would have had any impact on that, I don't know, but you can believe yourself we'd have damn well done our best to make sure they knew that we didn't agree with it. We, you know, I think as a fan base and as a city, we'd have tried to make them see where they're going wrong and whether you'd have made a change or not. But that's the thing, you can't just sit back and let it happen, and worse than that, sit back and defend it. And that's just what feels alien to me. But I might be wrong. I might just be being a bit romantic about how we would have been, because I think there are a lot of people from any club, any part of the country that, you know, they're easily sort of, the dollar signs light up in their eyes, and they're quite happy to get that new signing.
Yeah. Sadly, yeah. That's I agree 100%. I think the majority of the fan base, sadly, probably would have, sort of acquiesced, like City, you know, because I think there's so many who just care about silverware. Well, you see it; they don't care about the identity of the club; they just care about winning. But you know what? The thing that I loved most about going to the game was not the winning. To be honest, it was almost incidental. Yeah. It was brilliant in the 80s, particularly because when the city was under political, economic and social pressure, and nothing good seemed to be coming out of Liverpool. You know, to be able to go to London, to all these cities across the countries and chant Liverpool and be successful was wonderful. But kind of the thing why I went the match was to go with me mates, to have a good time, to have adventures, to go to places I'd never been to before, or probably would never go for any other reason. And you know what? If I would have been an Evertonian, I would have had the same experience, obviously with less success, but and less adventures, because you know less Europe. But I still would have gone with me mates, and I still would have really enjoyed the whole experience, because that's what was best about it. If going the match was just about the match, I think we all would have given up really early.
Yeah, and that's the. I sometimes think to myself, how do you cope being like a fan of, I don't know, say Stoke, when Stoke were going through a spell of kind of always finishing in the middle of the table playing football that I'll just say wasn't the most attractive football you could see. I used to think, how could you go watching that week in, week out? Well, the thing is, like you say, that's just the hour and a half. That's the excuse for going out, isn't it? It's not. Yeah. It's not why you're going. There's so much more to it than that, and so many memories. You could list memories going back years from going to matches, but there's probably more memories of outside the stadium and, on the way down, on the way home, what you did in that city or that town, apart from the match, because I don't think people realise just how much the culture includes the day out. I mean, the whole thing, the whole culture of that is something that, is great to have had the chance to be part of, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I think, what's difficult now, it's so different because you're in an all-season stadium. You can't gather with your mates. You can't move to another set of mates like you could during the stand. And often you split up. I mean, I hate that about going to match. It's when I'm in the press box, obviously I see people I know. But when I'm just in the ground, in the cop, you're miles away from it. My mates are scattered all around the main stands and the Kemlin. And so you see them before and you see them after, but inside, let's face it, especially if you're sober, for long spells, football can be very dull.
Yes.
It's just the way that the game is, and no one wants to admit it. Everyone wants to talk about techers and wants to have YouTube clips, but there are spells in matches which are flat.
That's
even
why a match of the day only shows highlights, because it couldn't stick loads of 90-minute games on.
Exactly. And, it's great because it builds the tension. But over the years, I'd stand there on the cop with my mates and especially when we were so on top, it was untrue. I'd have me back to the game talking to them. It's like I would be discussing all kinds. It was a social occasion. It wasn't the match was the focal point that got you all there, but it wasn't the be all and ends all. And and again with away games, and I feel sorry for people who only ever watch it on telly. Because you know what, you get beat by Leeds with a last-minute goal, and it's a sickener. If you're sitting there and watching on telly, what you do, you kick the cat, you go to bed.
Yeah.
It's and you go to bed angry. No, don't kick the cat. Katsuma, do not kick the cat.
Yes.
But anyway, kiddies, cat kicking is wrong. Anyway, but suffice to say, you go to bed, and you go to bed angry, you wake up angry. You know what? If I would have been there on Saturday night, I would have been, sort of round the corner to the Flat Iron. It's one of them. You have a few bevies, go into town, and you be in town. And by about 11:15, well, even before that, by about 11:45, I'd have forgot there was a defeat. We'd be having a laugh. We'd be slagging each other off. We would be drinking beer, and we'd be like, we'd be having a good night. And that is why, sort of going was so great. It's the easiest way to get over losing is to go for a bevy afterwards with your mates.
That's it, exactly. And as you say, that on TV you turn it off and that's the end of it. At the match, there's plenty more time before that's the end of it, before you get home. Even if you want to rush home, even if you're one of these who rushes out 10 minutes from the end, which I've never really got, to be honest. I've never really got the idea, unless you really, really need to leave because you shouldn't really be there because you really are going to miss your flight or something. Stay to the end, no matter how bad it is. That's what I always think. You never know what you might see. But the other aspect to that is when you're at the game, you're part of the crowd. You are that 12th man, and I do think that not being able to just go in and turn up and sit with your mates has made a big difference to the atmosphere at Anfield. Because you'd have been the same if you wanted to get into some games at Anfield and it was pay on the day. You had to get in that queue really early, well before kick-off. If you were lucky, you'd be in the cop maybe a couple of hours before kick-off, and that atmosphere would build. Mates would come and find you, wouldn't they, as the morning went on, or the afternoon went on, I should say. And by the time it was kick-off, everyone was so up for it. That cop was literally bouncing. And nowadays, it's like to stay with your mates and do the same kind of thing for the build-up. You're all in the same pub for a bit, aren't you? And then you all, as you say, you split up. You go and sit down next to someone you don't know. And unless you're the most extrovert person in the world, you're not going to be as loud next to some strangers as you are next to your mates, are you?
No, never at all. Never at all. And, it's, everyone talks about the great night atmosphere at Anfield. I think everyone thinks of ways of doing it. Bring more flags, bring scarves, get in early and that. My view on it, 3 pints for everyone.
Yeah.
3 pints for everyone. You come out of work for the night games. You have a quick 3, and then you're up to the grounds. It's just enough to make you a little bit like, how should we put it, more excitable than normal, but not enough to be too drunk. 3 pints, like, issue it to everyone, kids.
Yeah.
No, actually, no. I'm not encouraging kids to drink.
Yeah, we're not French.
But that's I mean, that's what seems to for me. And again, everyone go, why aren't you singing? Why aren't you singing? Anfield was not about singing. What it was about was the hostility. Yeah. It was about that massive grumble, that massive angry, it's the singing was a kind of a secondary thing, a byproduct. But Anfield, at its best, is when it's like when it's agitated and mildly angry. It's well, not mildly, actually, sometimes very angry. Yeah. When sort of you look at like things like the City game or the Barcelona game, where everyone feels they're being insulted and everyone's fuming when they get in. It's like and that's what the singing isn't. What singing isn't what makes atmosphere. What makes atmosphere is snarliness. Yeah. And when Anfield's snarly, it's great.
Yeah, because the referee's like, I'm not going to give that one. Balance. I'm not sure whether that was in or out, but I'll go with whatever the home fans want, just for a bit of peace and quiet. Frightening people into doing things. You just you're a visiting striker about to take what looks like an easy shot, and you just don't do it unless, we can probably think of a few players. One person that didn't work on was Mark Hughes, wasn't he? He always seemed to thrive on that, but most players, they can't deal with it. And this is the thing, it is a spectacle. The You'll Never Walk Alone was the thing before the game, and you never used to hear it much during the games and things. And, the singing was kind of done after the goals, wasn't it? But in between, yeah, it's hard to explain what the atmosphere is like. And like now, You'll Never Walk Alone has become such a serious thing. Put your scarf up and sing. This is important. I'm having a moment. It wasn't like that. People say, I don't think I ever sung "You'll Never Walk Alone" in the 80s. Sort of, that was the older generation to us. Yeah. And sort of, to us it was I'm a Liverpudlian, Scouser Tommy. It's one of them. But the other thing is, and people don't realise, that in the 70s, everyone sang "You'll Never Walk Alone," even the Manx. Yes.
It's like if you turn on the Big Match Revisited, you'll hear "You'll Never Walk Alone" being sung everywhere. And there was a clapping faster version that people often sang, but everyone sang it. Obviously, it was predominantly associated with us, but everyone sang it, so it wasn't that big a deal. But now it's almost like it's a religious rite. It's very serious business. Well, you know what? Football's not serious business, and singing a football matches isn't serious businesses. So please, just relax, chill. You'll never walk alone. It's no big deal. Just sing it.
Yeah, and on the same score, I wonder if I think Man City, their fans will finally realise where Hey Jude was written, where the band that sang Hey Jude came from. And, it sounds so weird listening to them singing along to that song. But you know what? That's the Beatles, isn't it? That's another thing from Liverpool that people love. And when they sort of let themselves just open their eyes to what's really in Liverpool, you know what? So many people love the city and love being here because it's a city that the people of the city are proud of the city, and the way it's improved so much in recent years thanks to European money in a lot of ways, but thanks also to the fight from Liverpool people to make sure it's better. And, I think if you're listening to this and you love the club, but you're not sure about the city, I advise you just come and have a visit. Just come spend a few days. Don't come when it's Eurovision because you'll not be able to afford the bill for the hotel, but come some other time and just enjoy the city because it's something else. And as Tony has not lived there for years, because of work and so on, it's still home for you, isn't it? And I'm sure, you'd be more than happy to welcome people if you bumped into them when you were out around Liverpool yourself. So hopefully, Tony,
yeah. And it's that's one of the things. And whenever I am home, it's amazing how many sort of Scandinavians and Americans you bump into you, and some of them have sort of recognised me from various things I've done over the years, and invariably you have a great time with them. It's and Liverpool's always been really welcoming. You know what? It's a port city. It's an international city. But people from different strange and exotic places were there all the time. You got used to seeing them.
Yeah.
And so it's deep in our mindset to welcome people. You know, we're not an insular landlocked town where, you know, it was a bicycle ride to the next village and, you know, it was a big deal to do that. You know, we're a multinational city with people coming and going. And that has permeated through to today, where people are just really great and friendly. And I advise anyone, if you're listening, you haven't been to Liverpool, get there. The one thing I can't stand is people who say, "Oh, you know, I'm a big Liverpool fan, but I wish the club was somewhere else."
God, yeah.
You know, and that just drives me insane. You know, it's a fella said that to me once on the train, and he had his little fella with him, his kid, and I've been talking to him for about 25 minutes. Train going back to London, and I just said, like, you know what, you know, you've got your little fellow with you, so I'm not gonna sort of react like I normally would. I said, but like, you know, basically, you know, if he wasn't here, you'd be getting the telling off of your life.
Yeah.
You know, it's and like, you know, I was like, you know, go and support another club, go somewhere else, you know, go somewhere where you're comfortable, because we don't want you. We want the little fella.
Yeah.
You know? Well, not him, but not you. You know, it's like, and basically, you know, he disgusted me, and people like that do disgust me.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, he's gone on the train, gone on the match, gone on the train, come home. He's not even enjoyed his day out, has he? Really, he's just gone for the match, and so he doesn't understand, as you've just said, what football's all about. So, you know, there's so much more to football than just the match. That's something I will tell anyone, and you'll hear it loads and loads and loads from people who are lucky enough to get to games. But when you are at the game, you can see so much more as well. So get to a game if you can. I know it's expensive, but get to the city if you can. Again, it may be a bit expensive, but please do it. I'm sure we'll have loads more conversations like this, because I'm sure you'll be on again with us soon, Tony. It's been great speaking to you for the last hour or so. It's flown by, and we haven't even sort of scraped the surface of some of the stuff we could have said. So, and we haven't ranted that much, have we?
Yeah, just a little bit. And you know what? The thing is, that's one of the great things about football. You can talk forever about it, and it brings people together. And it's one of them. People often say to me, you know, because it's your job and all that, do you ever get bored with it? I'm like, well, yeah, there are times when you think, you know, you're like a game. There was a game against Man U at Anfield, a Monday night game, and I had to file 1,000 words, and it was 0-0. It was drab. At half time, I'd written 35 words, and I'm like, this is not good. This is dull. But you know what? If you're bored with football, then you're bored with life, aren't you? You just have to be stupid. There's never, you know, in the bottom line, there's never been a game where I couldn't write 15,000 words about, and even drab 0-0 ones, and it's not boring, you know. And when you see as well the impact it has on people, and you see the faces light up when they're talking about it. And, you know, it's really great for the likes of me. You know, I can tell stories about Dalglish, I can tell stories about Rafa, I can tell stories about Klopp, you know, I can tell stories about the players I've met, I can tell, you know, the former players, you know, one of them. And you see the faces, they love it. Yeah. So how could you ever get bored with it?
I don't know. And that's it. I mean, and with Liverpool, you know what? Liverpool will always keep you excited, even if it's excited in a kind of nervous way, which is like the current Liverpool's way of doing things. But you know what? Liverpool will be back, and we will as well. So thanks for listening. Thanks to Tony for being here. Thanks for your columns as well. Keep reading Tony's columns on Anfield Index, because you'll learn a lot from them. Keep listening to us if you can. Listen to all the shows. And yeah, if you really want to think about the most recent game at the time of recording, we did a post-match podcast straight after. Somehow, I don't know how we went and did it, but you know, an hour or so later, we all felt a lot better, but maybe we'd have felt better if we would have all been in a pub doing it. But for now, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.